They saw her simple wool coat and judged her a stray who had wandered out of her class. They saw her quiet gaze fixed on the rain-streaked window and mistook it for timidity. When Brenda Walsh, senior purser for Majestic Air, decided to make an example of the woman in seat 2B, she believed she was curating an experience, preserving the sanctity of her first-class cabin. She felt a familiar thrill, a surge of righteous authority, as she signaled for the captain to call the police. She was a gatekeeper, and she had just caught an imposter. Brenda was certain she was winning a battle for standards and decency. She had no way of knowing she was in the process of incinerating a 25-year career, because the quiet woman wasn't just another passenger. She wasn't an inconvenience. She was the one person on Earth who could, with a single quiet command the very clouds to part or command the entire airline to fall from the sky. This is the story of what happens when brittle arrogance collides with the bedrock of true power, and the life-altering consequences that followed. The air in the Majestic Air Celestial Lounge at JFK was a carefully engineered symphony of calm. It smelled of polished leather, fresh orchids, and the faintest whisper of expensive French perfume. Through the vast floor-to-ceiling windows, the New York skyline was a jagged silhouette against a bruised purple dusk, the rain coming down in relentless, silvery sheets. The chaos of the main terminal, the frantic announcements, the crying children, the palpable anxiety of thousands of travelers, was a world away, muted to a distant, irrelevant hum. Dr. Evelyn Reed sat in a wingback chair in a quiet corner, a mug of chamomile tea growing cold in her hands. She was a ghost in this opulent machine. Her attire was the antithesis of the lounge's curated luxury. A pair of dark, comfortable trousers, practical flat shoes, and a simple charcoal grey wool coat that had seen her through many a cold morning walking to her lab. Her hair was pulled back into a simple, functional knot at the nape of her neck, and her face, devoid of makeup, was etched with a profound weariness that went bone deep. For the last 96 hours, she had been immersed in the sterile, high-stakes world of a neurological symposium in Geneva. She had delivered the keynote address, presenting her team's latest breakthrough in Alzheimer's research, a novel protein inhibitor that had shown staggering results in early trials. It was work that would change the world, work that consumed her every waking moment. The applause had been thunderous, the offers from pharmaceutical giants overwhelming. But now all she wanted was the anonymous silence of 30,000 feet. She wanted to close her eyes and let the drone of the engines erase the world. She didn't carry a gleaming aluminum suitcase or a handbag with an interlocking gold logo. A well-worn leather satchel, heavy with research papers and a laptop, rested at her feet. When the boarding call for Majestic Air Flight 88 to London, Heathrow, was announced, she finished her tea, slung the satchel over her shoulder, and walked toward the gate, her boarding pass a simple QR code on her phone. The gate agent, a young man with a nervous energy, glanced at her coat, then at the first-class designation on his screen, a flicker of cognitive dissonance in his eyes. But the scanner beeped green, and he waved her through with a mumbled, "Enjoy your flight." The true border crossing, however, was the aircraft door. There, stationed like a hawk guarding its nest, was Brenda Walsh. Brenda had been with Majestic Air since it was a plucky upstart, long before it became a titan of transatlantic travel. 25 years of service had starched her smile into a permanent brittle mask and honed her judgment into a razor-sharp instrument. Her uniform was immaculate, her blonde hair sprayed into a helmet of professional perfection, her lipstick a slash of defiant crimson. Brenda didn't just work in first class, she presided over it. It was her salon, her stage, and she was the director, producer, and lead actress. To her, maintaining its exclusivity was not just a job, it was a sacred duty. Evelyn stepped onto the plane, her eyes downcast, already anticipating the comfort of her seat. "Boarding pass," Brenda's voice cut through the air, sharp and unadorned with any welcome. Her hand was extended, palm up, a demand. Evelyn paused, looking up from under her tired brow. She held up her phone. Brenda squinted at the screen, her lips tightening into a thin, disapproving line. She took a moment longer than necessary, her eyes flicking from the screen to Evelyn's coat, to her sensible shoes, then back to the screen. Seat 2B, a window seat in the second row of the most exclusive cabin on the plane. a seat typically occupied by titans of industry, aging rock stars, or minor royalty, not by women who looked like they might be a graduate student on a university grant. "This is for 2B, Brenda stated, the words layered with disbelief, as if Evelyn might be confused about her own ticket. "Yes, it is," Evelyn replied, her voice low and slightly hoarse. "I'll need to see your identification," Brenda said, her tone implying it was a special security measure just for her. "I showed it at security and at the gate," Evelyn said, a hint of weariness creeping into her voice. "And now you'll show it to me," Brenda snapped, her professional smile never wavering, which made the command all the more chilling. "Airline policy, we must be vigilant." Too exhausted for a pointless confrontation, Evelyn sighed and pulled her passport from her satchel. She handed it over. Brenda opened it, her eyes scanning the name, Dr. Evelyn Reed. The doctor meant nothing to her. It was probably a PhD in something useless, she thought. The photo showed the same tired, plain face. Disappointed she couldn't find an immediate discrepancy, Brenda handed it back with a curt nod. "Second row, on your right. Please place your bag fully under the ottoman. We don't want the aisles cluttered." Evelyn murmured a thank you and moved past her, the scent of Brenda's hairspray stinging her nostrils. She found her seat, a spacious pod with plush leather and a privacy screen. She slid her satchel under the ottoman as instructed, took off her coat and sank into the seat. It was like sinking into a cloud. She pulled a well-thumbed paperback on cellular biology from her satchel, but she knew she wouldn't read. She just wanted the prop. She leaned her head against the cool glass of the window, watching the ground crew scurrying in the rain, and felt the first tendrils of sleep begin to claim her. She was drifting in that blissful state between consciousness and slumber when a voice, loud and slick with entitlement, shattered the calm. Excuse me, I think you're in my seat." Evelyn's eyes fluttered open. Standing in the aisle, illuminated by the soft cabin lighting, was a man who looked as though he had been assembled from a kit labeled obnoxious real estate developer. He was in his late 50s, with a florid face, a suit that was a size too tight, and a gold watch that gleamed ostentatiously. This was Harrison Vance. He wasn't just a passenger, he was a platinum elite, million-miler, and he made sure everyone, at all times, was aware of it. Brenda Walsh materialized at his side in an instant, her entire demeanor transforming. The icy gatekeeper melted away, replaced by a fawning, solicitous hostess. "Mr. Vance, welcome aboard. It is so wonderful to have you with us again. Is there a problem?" Harrison Vance gestured toward Evelyn with a dismissive flick of his wrist, as if shooing away a fly. "Yes, there's a problem, Brenda. You've got someone in my seat. I always sit in 2B. My assistant booked 2B. Check your manifest." Brenda leaned in, lowering her voice to a conspiratorial whisper, though it was still loud enough for Evelyn to hear every word. "I know, Mr. Vance. I am so sorry. The booking system must have had a glitch. It's highly unusual." "Unusual? It's unacceptable," Vance boomed, his voice bouncing off the curved cabin walls. "I pay a fortune to fly with this airline. I expect a certain ambiance, a certain caliber of fellow traveler. I don't expect to be seated next to the hired help on her day off." He sniffed the air theatrically. "Smells like damp wool in here." Evelyn's body went rigid. The insult, so casual and cruel, pierced through her fatigue. She slowly turned her head from the window. "I can hear you," she said, her voice quiet but clear, carrying a new note of steel. "And for the record, my ticket was paid for." Vance let out a short, barking laugh. "Oh, I'm sure it was, darling. But paid for by whom? An employer? A sweepstakes win? Don't tell me you used your own money." Brenda stepped forward, positioning herself between them, but she was facing Evelyn, her back a solid wall of support for Vance. "Ma'am," she said, her voice losing all its manufactured warmth and returning to Arctic efficiency. "You're causing a disturbance. Mr. Vance is one of our most valued clients. I'm going to have to ask you to gather your things. There's a perfectly comfortable seat available in 4D. Evelyn looked past Brenda to Vance, who was smirking, arms crossed, enjoying the show. Then she looked back at Brenda, truly seeing her for the first time. The years of resentment in her eyes, the desperate need for control in the set of her jaw. "No," Evelyn said. The single word fell into the cabin like a stone into a silent pool. The hushed conversations of other passengers ceased. All eyes turned toward them. Brenda's smile froze, cracking at the edges. "I beg your pardon." "I said no," Evelyn repeated, her voice gaining strength. She settled back into her seat, a subtle act of defiance. "I specifically selected this seat weeks ago. I am tired, I have a long journey, and I am not moving for a man who thinks his status gives him the right to be rude." Vance's face turned a shade of crimson that clashed with his expensive tie. "This is outrageous. Brenda, are you hearing this? Nobody is talking back to you. I am a personal friend of Arthur Finch, the CEO. I'll have your job for this." The threat, though likely empty, hit its mark. Brenda's face flushed with a mixture of anger and fear. Her authority was being questioned in front of her entire audience. In her mind, Evelyn was no longer a passenger. She was an insurrectionist, a threat to the established order of her cabin. She made a choice, a fateful one, born of prejudice and a desperate need to placate the loud, important man. "Ma'am," Brenda said, her voice now dangerously low and even. "Under FAA regulations, you are required to comply with the instructions of the flight crew. I am the senior crew member in this cabin. I am instructing you to move to seat 4D for the comfort and safety of all passengers. You are creating a hostile environment." "The only hostile person here is him," Evelyn said, gesturing calmly toward Vance. "My ticket is valid. My presence is not a threat. Now please leave me alone." "Harassing the crew now, are we?" Brenda's eyes lit up with a malevolent spark. She saw her opening. "I need to see your boarding pass again. And the credit card you used for the purchase. We need to verify the ticket wasn't acquired fraudulently." Evelyn's patience, already worn thin, finally snapped. "That is an outrageous accusation. You have no right to see my personal financial information. You are accusing me of fraud because I'm not wearing a designer suit, because I'm a black woman sitting in first class." "Now she's playing the race card," Vance exclaimed to the cabin at large. "Predictable." "Sit down and be quiet." Brenda's voice rose to a near shriek. She took a half step back, a calculated bit of theatre. "She's becoming aggressive. Mr. Vance, you saw that. She lunged at me. I saw it, clear as day." Vance lied instantly, puffing out his chest. "She threatened you, Brenda. That's a federal crime. You have to do something." Evelyn remained seated, her hands resting in her lap, a portrait of stillness. "I have not moved an inch. This entire cabin is a witness." "There are no cameras in the cabin, you fool," Brenda sneered, her mask of professionalism now completely gone, revealing the ugly face of her prejudice. "It's your word against mine and Mr. Vance's, and my word comes with a 25-year service record." With a swift, dramatic movement, Brenda snatched the inter-cabin phone from its cradle on the bulkhead. She punched in the 3-digit code for the cockpit. Her eyes, filled with a venomous triumph, were locked on Evelyn. "Captain, this is Purser Walsh in the first-class cabin. We have a Code 3 situation, a disruptive passenger in 2B. She is refusing to follow crew instructions. She has been verbally abusive to myself and another passenger, and she has made physically aggressive movements." She paused, listening. "Yes, Captain, I believe so. Her behavior is erratic. I do not feel it is safe to fly with her on board." She hung up the phone and a slow, cruel smile spread across her face. She turned to address the cabin. "Ladies and gentlemen, the captain has made the decision to return to the gate. We apologize for the delay, but the safety and security of our flight is our utmost priority." Then her eyes drilled into Evelyn. "The Port Authority police will be meeting us. You're finished." The cabin erupted in a chorus of groans and angry murmurs. Harrison Vance, however, clapped his hands together. "Bravo, Brenda. About time someone took out the trash." Evelyn didn't shout. She didn't plead. A profound sense of resignation settled over her. She had just wanted to sleep. She reached into her satchel and pulled out her phone. She calmly switched it off airplane mode. "You can't use that," Brenda barked, reaching as if to snatch it from her hand. Evelyn pulled her hand back. "We are on the ground, Brenda. The aircraft door is open. I am permitted to make a phone call." She found a number in her contacts, a number she rarely used. It was a direct line, one that bypassed secretaries and assistants. "Who are you calling?" Vance jeered. "Your public defender?" The phone rang once, twice. A man's voice, harried and stressed, answered. "Finch." "Arthur," Evelyn said, her voice a calm, quiet island in the sea of chaos. "It's Evelyn Reed." Brenda, who was standing over her, froze for a fraction of a second. The name seemed to register somewhere in the back of her mind. A memo she had skimmed, a name in a press release, but she dismissed it. It couldn't be. On the other end of the line, Arthur Finch, CEO of Majestic Air, nearly dropped his pen. "Dr. Reed, where are you? I thought you were in Geneva." "I am, or rather I was," Evelyn said, watching as the jet bridge began to reattach to the aircraft. "Currently, I'm on Flight 88 in Seat 2B, and I'm about to be arrested." There was a stunned silence. "Arrested? For what?" "For being a disruptive passenger, apparently," Evelyn said, her voice devoid of emotion. "Your senior purser, a Ms. Brenda Walsh, has decided I am a security threat because I refused to give up my seat to another passenger. She has accused me of fraud and assault. We are returning to the gate now." She paused. "Arthur, I suggest you get down here immediately. And I suggest you bring the corporate ownership file, the one with my name on it." She ended the call and placed her phone on the small table beside her. The plane shuddered to a halt. The engines whined down into silence. "I hope that was your lawyer," Brenda said, her confidence restored. "You're going to need a very good one." "Actually," Evelyn said, looking out the window at the flashing blue and red lights approaching on the tarmac, "I think you're the one who's going to need a lawyer, Brenda." 3 minutes later, the main cabin door hissed open. 2 Port Authority police officers stepped aboard. They were large men, their faces set in the grim, no-nonsense expression of those who deal with the worst of humanity on a daily basis. "We received a call about a disruptive passenger," the lead officer, whose name tag read Miller, said to Brenda. Brenda pointed a perfectly manicured, trembling finger at Evelyn. "That's her, Seat 2B. She was threatening, unstable. Be careful." Officer Miller approached Evelyn's seat. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to come with us." Evelyn stood up slowly, picking up her satchel. "Am I being charged with a crime?" "You are being detained for investigation of interfering with a flight crew," Miller said, his voice flat. "Turn around, please. Place your hands behind your back." The metallic click of the handcuffs echoed through the deathly silent cabin. Harrison Vance let out a triumphant whoop. "Lock her up! Good riddance to bad rubbish!" As the officers began to lead Evelyn down the aisle, her head held high, Brenda Walsh leaned in close, her voice a venomous whisper in Evelyn's ear. "You should have just moved to 4D, dear. It would have been so much simpler." Evelyn stopped walking. She turned her head just enough to meet Brenda's gaze. "Brenda," she said, her voice loud enough for the pilots, who had just opened the cockpit door, to hear clearly. "Before you file your report, you might want to check the passenger manifest one more time. Look for the special designation next to my name. It's a code you've probably never seen before. It stands for majority owner." Brenda's triumphant smirk dissolved. But it was too late. The officers were already guiding Evelyn off the plane and into the cold, sterile confines of the jet bridge. The air in the jet bridge was stale, heavy with the smell of industrial carpet and jet fuel. Officer Miller kept a firm hand on Evelyn's arm as he began to recite her Miranda rights. His partner, Officer Rossi, followed behind. Evelyn didn't resist. She walked with a strange, unnerving calm. She was waiting. Brenda Walsh stood at the aircraft door, her arms crossed, observing the procession. The seed of doubt Evelyn had planted was beginning to sprout, a cold tendril of fear coiling in her stomach. The name, Reed. The recent acquisition of the Airline by the tech giant, Helix Innovations. The founder of Helix was a reclusive genius, a Dr. Reed. No, it was impossible. It was a bluff. A desperate lie from a cornered woman. She clung to that thought like a life raft. "Make sure you put in the report that she was non-compliant from the moment she boarded," Brenda called after them, her voice a little too loud, a little too shrill. "We've got it, ma'am," Rossi called back, not bothering to turn around. They were halfway up the ramp when the doors to the terminal burst open with such force that they slammed against the wall. A man in a disheveled but exquisitely tailored suit sprinted through, his face pale and beaded with sweat, his silver hair flying. He was followed by two frantic-looking airport officials in high-visibility vests. It was Arthur Finch, the CEO of Majestic Air. Brenda's heart stopped. She had met Mr. Finch twice in 25 years, both times at corporate award ceremonies. What in God's name was he doing here, in person, at Gate C42 on a rainy Tuesday night? "Stop!" Arthur Finch's voice was a ragged roar of pure panic. "Everybody, stop right now!" Officer Miller instinctively turned, his hand dropping to the taser on his belt. "Sir, stay back. This is a secure area." Arthur ignored him completely. His eyes, wide with terror, were fixed on Evelyn. When he saw the cold steel of the handcuffs around her wrists, a strangled gasp escaped his lips. The color drained from his face, leaving it a pasty, unhealthy gray. "My God," he whispered. He stumbled forward, his gaze shifting from Evelyn to the two police officers. "What have you done? Take those off her. Take them off her this instant." Officer Miller frowned, confused. "Sir, I don't know who you are, but this woman is being detained at the request of the flight crew for assaulting a crew member." "Assaulting a crew member?" Arthur shrieked, his voice cracking. "This woman couldn't assault a fly. She's not a suspect. She's the airline." The jet bridge fell into a profound silence, broken only by the drumming of the rain on the corrugated roof. Brenda Walsh took a slow, hesitant step forward, her tablet clutched to her chest. "Mr. Finch." "Sir, I'm Purser Walsh. I'm afraid there's been a terrible misunderstanding. This person was causing a scene." Arthur spun around to face her, and the look in his eyes was something Brenda had never seen before. It was a look of pure, unadulterated fury. "Person," he spat, the word dripping with contempt. "You foolish, arrogant woman. Do you have any idea who this is?" Brenda looked at Evelyn, at the simple coat, the tired face, the woman she had dismissed, judged and condemned. She's Evelyn Reed," Brenda stammered, the name tasting like ash in her mouth. "She is Dr. Evelyn Reed," Arthur corrected, his voice trembling with rage. "Founder and CEO of Helix Innovations, the company that completed its acquisition of a 51% controlling stake in Majestic Air 72 hours ago. I work for her. The board works for her. You, Ms. Walsh, work for her." The blood drained from Brenda's head so quickly she felt dizzy. The world tilted on its axis. The quiet threat, the phone call, it all came crashing down on her with the force of a physical blow. She hadn't just disciplined a difficult passenger, she had called the police on her new boss. The woman who owned the plane, the gate, the uniform on her back, and the pension she had spent 25 years building. Evelyn stood motionless, the handcuffs a grotesque accessory. She looked at Arthur, her expression unreadable. "Arthur, thank you for coming, though your airline's welcoming protocol could use some refinement." "Get those cuffs off her now," Arthur bellowed at the officers. Miller and Rossi exchanged a panicked glance. They had stumbled into a corporate execution. Fumbling with his keys, Miller quickly unlocked the cuffs. Evelyn brought her hands forward, rubbing the red, angry marks on her wrists. She didn't look at the police, she didn't look at Arthur. Her gaze, cold and deliberate, settled on Brenda Walsh. Brenda felt as if she had been pinned to a board. "Mr. Finch, sir," she whimpered, her voice barely audible. She didn't look. Her clothes. "And Mr. Vance, he's a platinum elite," he insisted. "Mr. Vance?" Evelyn's voice was quiet, but it cut through the tension like a scalpel. "Is that the gentleman who called me, hired help, and said I smelled of damp wool?" Arthur looked as if he was about to have a coronary. "He said what?" "The man in 2A, Evelyn continued, her tone as conversational as if discussing the weather. "He wanted my seat. Brenda here decided his platinum status was more important than my confirmed ticket. When I refused to be moved, she and Mr. Vance conspired to invent a story about me being aggressive. She called the police based on a lie." Evelyn took a step toward Brenda, who involuntarily flinched. "You told them I was unstable, Brenda. You called me a fool. But the truth is, you judged me the second I walked onto your plane. You saw a black woman in a simple coat, and your mind created a narrative that fit your prejudices. You decided I didn't belong. No, I swear it wasn't like that." Brenda was openly sobbing now, black streaks of mascara tracing paths down her cheeks. "I was just following procedure. You were being difficult. Procedure. Evelyn's voice hardened. Show me the page in your manual that instructs you to believe a belligerent man over a quiet woman. Show me the procedure for fabricating an assault claim to federal officers. You weren't following procedure. You were on a power trip. Evelyn turned to Arthur. Fire her, she said. The words were not shouted, they were delivered with the flat finality of a judge passing sentence. For cause: gross misconduct, endangerment of a passenger, and filing a false security report. Terminate her employment effective immediately. Have security escort her from the airport. Consider it done, Arthur said without hesitation. No, Brenda wailed, her legs giving out as she sank to her knees on the grimy carpet of the jet bridge. Please, I have a mortgage. I have 25 years. And Mr. Finch, Evelyn added, her gaze shifting back toward the open door of the aircraft. Tell the officers not to leave. We're going back on board. Mr. Harrison Vance and I have some unfinished business. The first-class cabin of Flight 88 was still humming with the residue of the drama. Harrison Vance was holding court, leaning over his seat to speak with a couple behind him. It's about time the airlines cracked down, he was saying, his voice full of self-importance. You let one of them in, the standards just plummet. Brenda did the right thing, a true professional. He took a triumphant sip of the scotch the junior flight attendant had nervously served him. Suddenly, the PA system crackled. A woman's voice, crisp, calm, and imbued with an unshakable authority, filled the cabin. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is Dr. Evelyn Reed. It appears there has been a slight change of plans. Harrison Vance froze, the glass halfway to his lips. He knew that voice. The cockpit door opened, and Evelyn Reed stepped out. She was no longer flanked by police officers as a prisoner, but as their commander. Beside her stood the CEO of the airline. The entire cabin fell into a stunned, tomb-like silence. Vance's glass slipped from his fingers, landing with a soft thud on the plush carpet, a dark stain spreading like a guilty secret. Evelyn stood at the front of the cabin, holding the attendant's handset. She looked directly at Harrison Vance. We are experiencing a delay this evening, she announced, her voice echoing through the entire aircraft, from first class to the last row of economy. The delay is due to a security incident involving a passenger filing a false report with the flight crew and federal officers. She handed the handset to Arthur Finch. My name is Arthur Finch, CEO of Majestic Air, he boomed. On behalf of the entire airline, I want to offer my most profound and sincere apology to Dr. Reed for the disgraceful treatment she received from our staff and another passenger. He pointed toward the open cabin door. A security guard was now escorting a hysterical Brenda Walsh away, her ID badge and wings already stripped from her uniform. Evelyn stepped forward, her attention focused solely on Vance. Mr. Vance, she said, her voice an the low, mechanical whine of the jet bridge retracting was the only sound in the suspended silence. Arthur Finch stood beside her, his hands clasped so tightly his knuckles were white, his face a mask of residual panic and burgeoning awe. The two police officers hovered nearby, their professional composure shattered, now looking more like awkward bystanders at a corporate coup. Evelyn Reed did not turn to watch Harrison Vance being escorted away. She had seen enough of him. His shrieking indignation was a predictable frequency, the final impotent roar of a man whose only tool, intimidation, had just been rendered useless. Her focus was inward, on the strange, hollow space that had opened up inside her chest, where the rage had been only moments before. Victory did not feel triumphant. It felt sterile. She looked back into the first-class cabin. The other passengers, paragons of wealth and status, who had witnessed her humiliation with detached amusement, were now frozen in their seats. Their faces were a gallery of pale, averted glances and feigned interest in safety cards. They were terrified of her, and she found no satisfaction in it. They hadn't seen a person being defended, they had seen one predator replaced by a much larger one. Dr. Reed, Arthur stammered, his voice a strained whisper, please, allow us to get you back to your seat. We'll find a new crew. We can have a replacement purser here in 20 minutes. We'll make up the time. We can still get you to London. Evelyn's gaze drifted to seat 2B, the plush leather, the gleaming console, the window with its view of the rain-slicked tarmac. It was just a chair, an object. But it had become a battlefield, a symbol of a fight she hadn't asked for but had been forced to win. To sit in it now would feel like occupying conquered territory, and the thought repulsed her. "No," she said, her voice quiet but carrying the weight of absolute finality. She picked up her worn leather satchel, slinging its familiar weight over her shoulder. She pulled on her simple wool coat, the one Vance had mocked. It felt like armor. "Cancel the flight, Arthur." The CEO's eyes widened in disbelief. "Cancel? Dr. Reed, I don't think I understand. There are over 250 people on board. And every single one of them will be rebooked on the first available flights tomorrow," Evelyn stated, her tone leaving no room for negotiation. "Majestic Air will provide for their accommodation at a 5-star hotel. They will be given meal vouchers and a full refund of their original ticket price, along with a credit for a future international flight. The full cost is ours to bear." "But the cost," Arthur began, the numbers already spinning in his head. Hundreds of thousands of dollars in an instant. The logistical chaos, the reputational damage. "The reputational damage has already been done, Arthur," she cut him off, her gaze sweeping over the silent, fearful faces in the cabin. "It was done when your senior employee decided a person's worth was determined by their clothing. It was done when a paying customer was forced to endure public humiliation. It was done when the system you built allowed a bully to weaponize his status." She turned and faced him fully, her eyes holding his. "This isn't a punishment, it's a message. It is the very first policy decision of the new ownership. Let this be the lesson that echoes from the ground crew to the boardroom. At Majestic Air, human dignity is not a negotiable commodity. It is the price of doing business. A night of inconvenience will give everyone on this aircraft, passengers and crew alike, a chance to reflect on that. Ground the plane." Without another word, she turned and walked down the jet bridge, her sensible shoes making soft, determined sounds on the industrial carpet. She left behind a maelstrom of consequences, a stunned CEO and an airplane full of people who were about to learn that sometimes the quietest voice carries the most thunderous command. The next 48 hours were a trial by fire. The story, predictably, exploded. But it was a fractured, distorted version of the truth. A passenger, eager for their 15 minutes of viral fame, had filmed the final moments. Evelyn standing at the front of the cabin, her face impassive, her voice cold as she cancelled the flight. Vance's PR machine, funded by the dregs of his fortune, worked overtime, feeding a narrative to ravenous news outlets. She wasn't a wronged customer, she was Hurricane Evelyn, the out-of-touch, tyrannical billionaire who threw a multi-million-dollar tantrum over a seating dispute. She was the monster who stranded hundreds, including families with children and elderly travelers, all because her ego was bruised. The caricature was so grotesque, so alien to her own identity, that she felt a strange sense of dissociation watching it unfold. Dr. Evelyn Reed, who spent her days in a quiet lab coaxing secrets from the tangled proteins of the human brain, was now a public villain. Her work, which aimed to restore memory and dignity to the most vulnerable, was eclipsed by an act perceived as the ultimate arrogance. The stock ticker for Majestic Air bled red, a constant flickering judgment. The emergency board meeting was held in a sterile glass-walled room overlooking a grey, unforgiving Manhattan skyline. The air was thick with panic. Lawrence Bishop, the board's acting chairman and a relic of the old guard, paced in front of the window, his face the colour of a ripe plum. "An unmitigated disaster," he boomed, slapping a sheaf of papers onto the polished mahogany table. "Vance and the purser, Brenda Walsh, have filed a joint lawsuit. $50 million. Defamation, wrongful termination, emotional distress. They're painting you as a corporate despot. We have to settle. We issue a groveling apology, cut them a check, and pray this goes away." The other board members murmured their assent, a chorus of frightened men and women desperate to protect their portfolios. Evelyn sat at the head of the table, perfectly still, a cup of untouched tea before her. She let the panic wash over the room, studying it with the dispassionate curiosity of a scientist observing a chemical reaction. Finally she spoke. Her voice was not loud, but it seemed to absorb all the sound in the room, leaving a profound silence in its wake. "We will not be settling. "Be reasonable, Evelyn," Bishop said, his tone dripping with condescension. "You may understand laboratories, but this is the real world. Public perception is a beast. Right now, it's eating us alive." "Public perception is based on a lie," she countered calmly, "and you do not defeat a lie by paying it tribute. You defeat it with the truth." She looked to Arthur Finch, who sat at the far end of the table, looking pale but resolute. He had spent the last 2 days buried in personnel files and flight records, and the experience seemed to have forged a new spine in him. "Arthur, please share your findings." Arthur stood, clearing his throat. Mr. Vance's ticket for Flight 88 was not, as he claimed, a full-fare first-class purchase. It was a complimentary upgrade, issued as a service recovery gesture for a complaint he filed on a flight 2 months prior. He paused, letting the words land. On that flight, he accused a female flight attendant of being insolent. Our investigation found this was the 4th such complaint Mr. Vance had filed in the last 18 months, each one targeting a female crew member of color, and each one resulting in the airline awarding him a free international first-class voucher to make him go away. A stunned silence fell over the room. Bishop's face went from plum to a sickly grey. "He wasn't a valued customer," Evelyn continued, her voice slicing through the quiet. "He was a parasite who had learned to manipulate your system's fear of confrontation. He was a professional extortionist masquerading as a platinum client. And Brenda Walsh was his willing accomplice." She slid a thick blue folder across the table. "Ms. Walsh's personnel file. It shows 3 prior official complaints lodged against her for discriminatory behavior, 2 involving race and 1 involving a passenger with a disability. In each case, our legal department, under the previous leadership, settled quietly and sealed the record to avoid negative press. We didn't solve the problem. We buried it." She stood up, her small frame commanding the space. This incident wasn't a spark, it was the eruption of a sickness that has been festering in the heart of this company for years. A culture that equates wealth with worth, silence with complicity, and appeasement with customer service. The lawsuit they have filed is not a threat. It is a gift. It is an opportunity to lance the wound. She walked to the window, looking down at the city below. "We will not settle. We will countersue. We will depose Mr. Vance and Ms. Walsh under oath. We have already acquired sworn affidavits from 5 other passengers, including 2 from the economy cabin who witnessed the entire event. My team has also purchased the full, unedited video from the passenger who filmed it. It clearly shows Mr. Vance's initial insults and Ms. Walsh's fabrication of an assault." She turned back to the board, her eyes blazing with a cold fire. "We are not issuing an apology for my actions. We are issuing a public statement with all the evidence attached, detailing the systemic failures that led to this moment. And we are announcing a new company-wide initiative, not a protocol, a philosophy. We are going to fundamentally retrain every single employee in what it means to serve the public. We will teach them that the dignity of the person in seat 34E is just as sacred as the person in 1A. We will empower them to de-escalate, but also to stand firm against abuse, regardless of the passenger's status. We will install audio recording devices in the galleys, not for surveillance, but for protection, to shield our crew and our passengers from false accusations. This is corporate suicide," Bishop sputtered, "airing our dirty laundry. It's radical." "No," Evelyn replied, her voice softening slightly. "It's chemotherapy. It will be painful. It will be costly. We will lose some battles in the court of public opinion. But it is the only way to cure the disease. The alternative is to let the cancer of this culture metastasize until the entire airline rots from the inside out." She looked at each of them, her gaze unwavering. "The meeting is over. The work is just beginning." 3 months later, Brenda Walsh sat in a small, airless room at a law firm in Queens. The lawsuit had collapsed in on itself with spectacular speed. Faced with the unedited video and a mountain of evidence, their lawyers had dropped them. Evelyn's countersuit was a pending guillotine. Brenda's life, once a carefully curated stage of authority and control, had been dismantled piece by piece. Her employment was gone. Her pension forfeited due to the gross misconduct clause. Her name was now synonymous with a particular brand of viral bigotry. She was unemployable in the industry she had given her life to. Her apartment, once her sanctuary from the world, now felt like a prison. The silence was the worst part. For 25 years, her life had been scored by the hum of engines, the chime of the seatbelt sign, the murmur of the cabin. Now there was only the drip of a faulty faucet and the sound of her own hollow breathing. She would catch her reflection in the darkened television screen and see a stranger. A woman stripped of her uniform, her wings, her purpose. The crisp, crimson lipstick was gone, replaced by the pale, thin line of her mouth. Who was she, without the uniform? She was just Brenda, a 52-year-old woman with a high school education and a mortgage she could no longer pay. The authority she had wielded for a quarter of a century had not been her own. It had been borrowed from the brand, from the altitude, from the structured hierarchy of the cabin. On the ground, she was no one. The realization came to her not in a flash, but in a slow, creeping dawn of horror. She had judged Evelyn Reed. She had looked at the simple coat, the tired face, the color of her skin and her mind, conditioned by years of reinforcing the invisible walls of class and privilege, had made an instant calculation. She does not belong here. It had felt like an objective truth, a law of nature. She hadn't been malicious, she told herself. She had been maintaining order, preserving standards. But what standard? The standard that a man like Vance, loud, rude, and reeking of entitlement, inherently belonged, while a woman like Reed, quiet, weary, and brilliant, did not? She had spent her career enforcing a set of rules she now realized were built on a foundation of sand, on the ugliest and most baseless of human prejudices. The power she thought she had was just the petty tyranny of a gatekeeper, and she had used it to try and bar the door to the woman who owned the entire castle. The irony was so profound, it was almost physically painful. One afternoon, a letter arrived. It was not from a lawyer. The envelope was heavy cream-colored cardstock, and the return address was simply a corporate office in Midtown. Inside was a single typed note. Ms. Walsh, I will be at the cafe on the corner of Lex and 51st this Thursday at 3 p.m. I would like to speak with you. This is not a deposition. There will be no lawyers. It is simply a conversation. The choice to attend is, of course, entirely yours. Dr. Evelyn Reed. Brenda read the note 10 times. It was a summons, cloaked in politeness. What could she possibly want? To gloat? To offer a pittance of a settlement in exchange for a public confession? Her first instinct was to tear it up, to refuse this final humiliation. But a deeper, more desperate curiosity took hold. She had to know. She had to look this woman in the eye, away from the chaos of the jet bridge, and understand the force that had so utterly obliterated her world. The cafe was anonymous, a place of transient business lunches and hurried coffees. Brenda arrived 20 minutes early, her hands trembling. She wore a simple black dress, the best thing she had left. When Evelyn walked in, precisely at 3, she looked much the same as she had on the plane, unadorned, dressed for comfort, not for effect. She carried the same leather satchel. She ordered 2 black coffees and sat down opposite Brenda. For a long moment, neither spoke. The air crackled with unspoken things. It was Evelyn who broke the silence. Thank you for coming. Brenda gave a short, bitter laugh. Did I have a choice? You always have a choice, Ms. Walsh, Evelyn replied, her voice even. That's the one thing I've come to understand through all of this. We are all making choices every minute. On the plane that night, you made a series of them. I made a mistake, Brenda whispered, the words tasting like poison. I misjudged the situation. No, Evelyn said, leaning forward slightly. A mistake is entering the wrong departure time into a logbook. Misjudging is thinking the turbulence will last 10 minutes when it lasts 20. What you did was more fundamental. You made a judgment. You looked at me and you didn't see a passenger. You saw a problem to be solved, an anomaly to be corrected. My question, the one that my lawyers and the board of directors cannot answer for me, is why? The question hung in the air between them. It was not an accusation. It was a genuine inquiry, spoken with the calm, persistent curiosity of a scientist. Brenda looked down at her hands, at the chipped nail polish, the hands that had served thousands of meals, buckled hundreds of children, and pointed accusingly at the woman who now sat before her, demanding an accounting of her soul. "Because I was scared," Brenda said, the admission so quiet she barely heard it herself. "Because a man like Vance, he yells, he threatens your job, he knows the CEO. He's a storm you have to navigate. You were quiet. You were an unknown. And in my world, my little kingdom at 35,000 feet, unknowns are dangerous. It was just easier to placate the loud man. It was easier to believe he belonged there more than you did." She finally looked up, tears welling in her eyes. It was easier to be a coward. Evelyn listened, her expression unreadable. She took a slow sip of her coffee. "I didn't cancel the flight to punish you, Brenda," she said softly. "I know that's what the world thinks. I cancelled it because the system, the one that taught you that cowardice was the easier choice, was broken. The whole machine was sick, and you and I and Harrison Vance were just gears grinding against each other. I just happened to be the one who could reach up and pull the emergency brake." She reached into her satchel and pulled out a simple business envelope. She slid it across the table. "This isn't a settlement, it's severance. 25 years of service, however flawed, should not result in destitution. It's the amount you would have been entitled to upon normal retirement." Brenda stared at the envelope as if it were a venomous snake. "Why?" "Because the culture I am trying to build at my company cannot be built on vengeance," Evelyn said. "It has to be built on accountability and then on the possibility of change. What you do with this is your choice. You can see it as a payout, or you can see it as a chance to build a life where you are no longer afraid, where you no longer feel the need to decide who does and does not belong." Evelyn stood up, leaving her coffee untouched. "The countersuit against you will be dropped. I cannot say the same for Mr. Vance. His was not a failure of courage, but an act of malice. There is a difference." She slung her satchel over her shoulder. "I wish you peace, Brenda." And then she was gone. Brenda sat alone in the cafe, her hand resting on the envelope. The money would solve her practical problems. But the conversation, the quiet, devastating autopsy of her choices, had given her something far more terrifying and valuable. A chance to face the stranger in the mirror and begin the long, arduous task of getting to know herself. A year later, Evelyn Reed boarded Majestic Air Flight 88 to London. The terminal was different, calmer. The gate agents smiled, their greetings warm and unforced. The new Majestic Air logo was a subtle, soaring bird, its wings a gentle gradient of colors, a quiet testament to diversity. At the aircraft door, the senior purser, a kind-faced man named Robert, greeted her by name. "Dr. Reed, a genuine pleasure to have you with us. We have your seat ready for you." She settled into 2B. It was just a seat again. She watched as Robert knelt to speak to an elderly woman across the aisle who was traveling alone and was clearly a nervous flyer. He spoke to her with a gentle patience, his voice a low murmur of reassurance, offering her a cup of tea and promising to check on her throughout the flight. It was a small act, a simple moment of human connection. But it was everything. As the plane ascended, banking over the glittering tapestry of New York City, Evelyn leaned her head against the cool glass of the window. The fatigue was still a familiar companion, the weight of her work and her company a constant pressure. But the hollow space in her chest was gone. It had been filled not with the fleeting satisfaction of victory, but with a quiet, profound, and deeply human equilibrium. She had faced the storm, not just in the cabin, but within herself, and had emerged into a clearer sky. The turbulence was over, and for the first time in a very long time, as the drone of the engines lulled her into a state of peace, she closed her eyes and truly slept.